everybody. Welcome back to the Beyond the Peloton podcast. I'm Spencer Martin, author of the Beyond the Peloton newsletter. I'm here with Andrew Vontz of the Choose a Hard Way podcast at betterlab.io. We're gonna chop it up about gravel worlds. I've got a few contract misinformation potentially questions for you, Andrew. You've got some theories about this, and I don't know. We don't want to spoil anything, but I guess we could talk about Lombardia coming up this weekend. I think we know who's going to win. I don't know how much there is to say about that race, but we'll get into it a little bit. But Andrew, do you want to plug anything before we get going?
If you have used a wearable to monitor your sleep, and I bet many of you have, you're familiar with your sleep score ruining your race, your workout, your day. Get the Better Lab and start doing the things that science shows actually improve your sleep. We guide you to do it mindfully. It just takes a few minutes a day. It's free in the Apple App Store. Go get the Better Lab. Start today. Start sleeping better. Even for gravel, like you're going to sleep better for gravel. You're going to be ready to crush gravel worlds the next time you're in a pen with 500 other racers. Get after it.
Yeah. Does this work? Does this technology work for gravel? I'm sure you get that question a lot.
We definitely have a gravel specific track. So get the Better Lab and get better gravel results.
for these upcoming big sugar, little sugar. I never know what sugar is happening, Andrew. Do you know these dates for the sugars?
I'm more of a stevia. The thing that I just thought about, Spencer, was, of course, the incident at Little Toots, which will go down in history of cycling journalism. What a scene that day. But I'm thinking about the week leading up to SBT, as has happened to me many times. And I've actually now talked to many listeners of Beyond the Peloton doing research and user testing for the Better Lab. And so many of them tell me the same story, where either there's someone who habitually looks at their wearable sleep score when they get up, or they accidentally look at it. That happened to me before SBT. I inadvertently was exposed to my recovery score, which was like 18% the day of the race. It told me I was going to die, to go back in bed. And in fact, I felt okay and had a good day.
Yeah, this is like, if you, the meanest thing you could ever do to someone is like tell them their recovery score. They'll never be the same.
Completely.
Again. They'll never recover.
Yeah, that's why pro cycling teams are telling riders not to look at those scores anymore before they race or do training. All right, so let's talk gravel.
World Championships this past weekend. The winners are Mathieu van der Poel, shocking that he would win a bike race, and then also Marianne Vos. And the women's, a lot to dissect here. A lot of people are upset about this because the big bag roadies are coming in, exposing themselves as casuals, right? They don't remember those two as professional mountain bike racers. And then also, probably the two best cyclocross racers of all time in their respective gender disciplines. But yeah, setting that aside, the roadies are coming in, winning all the gravel races. What's the point of gravel? Why do we even have these races? I'd say just up top, Andrew, I think you mentioned this during the day of the race. Looked fantastic. I'd say the big winner of the weekend was the woods around Leuven, the forest. Like, did that not look amazing? Just want to go ride there.
Yeah, it looked incredible. And I don't know about you, but before cyclocross became extinct around 2018, I used to consume a lot of cyclocross content, and I used to watch the training races that pros over there would do in the woods in Belgium, and it just looked incredible. Just phenomenal terrain. It made me fantasize about getting to ride on that train, and that's what we saw in this event. I've talked to a lot of people who are still trashing this race as it wasn't a real gravel race. This wasn't a real course. This course looked legit to me. It looked like it had a lot of different types of terrain, just like we would see at a BWR event, at a Lifetime Grand Prix event. I think they even gave the pros, Spencer, the same experience, the gravel spirit experience that I had at SBT, that you and I had at BWR, where you're crammed into a pen with, in the pro race, it was 300 riders. I saw an age grouper, Lawrence Carpenter from the UK, who went over to do the gravel worlds, and I believe in his age group, he had 500 people in his pen, and he was complaining about it. He said people got there 2.5 hours early and were eating breakfast in the pen. This of course raises the question that's all on our mind. Where are you going to the bathroom if you're in the pen 2.5 hours early? I don't know if anyone checked that pen following the race start. I have some theories. And I thought You know what, Lawrence? You're actually getting the gravel spirit experience, because that's what you have to do if you're an amateur and you go to any of these events and want to actually race. You're going to sit in a pen for 30 minutes to an hour. You're going to pray that you get there early enough that you have a snowball's chance to actually be in the front group, which if you're not in the front 50 people, it's probably not happening. It's just like a cyclocross race. So they got the real gravel spirit experience. That's my take.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, people are complaining this isn't a real gravel race. It's like, excuse me. Yeah, they got there 2.5 hours before, probably pooping in that pen, as you're saying. That's gravel. That's gravel, right?
Yeah.
There. I don't care what anybody says. I would say I wanted to go to Belgium to ride these forested paths. Also,
yeah,
I don't know. A friend of mine that lives in Switzerland was trying to explain this to me when we were at the Tour of Alsace together. But there's just like endless roads and paths to ride in Europe in general. But I guess it's just people have been living there a long time. So they build a road. 1,000 years later, they build another series of roads. 1,000 years later, they build more roads, and then they built the highways. So nobody even goes on the old roads anymore. So you have a lot of roads to ride. But that's what it seemed like. I would not say I wanted to go do this race. Like seeing these videos of people fighting through hundreds of riders, like stuck in the mud just to get to 600th place instead of 1,000th place. That does not appeal to me. Am I just getting soft in my old age? Like, did you want to go do this?
No, the vibe that I picked up from this, and this was, again, going back to the now extinct discipline of cyclocross, which I do love very much, and I will.
I'm going to Valmont Cyclocross, October 26th.
Oh, wow. Are you racing?
No, we are doing a spectating with my son, and then he might do the 8 and under race. We'll see.
Well, I feel like you owe it to Beyond the Peloton fans to get out there and pull the horns.
I don't even know if I could. Can you do a cross race on a gravel bike? Has anyone tried this before?
Would it even
work? I don't know.
You can make it cyclocross specific. There's some modifications you could make. I think fans want it. So if you want to see Spencer out there at Valmont on October 18th, going head to head with the current former staff of Velo and the Escape Collective, because they're going to be out there on mosaics ready to win. I'm talking to you, Chris Case. Let's see what goes down. So I think I personally didn't have any interest in competing in this event. And I thought about what is the profile of the person who's going and doing this. I mean, there are people who want to experience a world championship, and the older age groups, 35 plus and above. The thing that I actually thought about, again, going back to the cyclocross days, because there is a Masters Cyclocross World Championship. It is not held concurrently with the actual World Championship. And there, of course, also are the U.S. Cyclocross National Championships, Pro, Elite, and then Single Speed. And, it used to be the case that if you were a hotshot local or someone with the resources, that was the kind of thing you would go do and then perhaps post about on LinkedIn. So that's kind of the vibe that this Masters thing had to me. Probably like the person who's going to do the Haute route, like that type of vibe, which that's cool if like that's your jam. But
yeah, I feel like Haute route, I could see a path where I'm doing that though. Like, doesn't that kind of look interesting? And then you're like, this just looked miserable.
I mean, you're an international man of mystery, Spencer. So I think that kind of fits your profile. You might just be over there doing something and while you're summering in Europe.
Yeah. You're
right?
Like, oh, the Haute route's going right by my rented chalet for the summer.
Yeah, my pied à terre. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, like you said, man, that terrain just looked phenomenal. I had this fantasy of going out the door and riding a train like that. Here in Mid-Coast Maine, you can kind of piece together some things like that. The Maine Gravel Series here has some really incredible routes. When they piece them together, though, it's stuff like you're going on what during the winter is a snowmobile trail. There are human head size rocks that you're riding over in a creek bed. And then there are weeds that come up to your armpits on the bike and you're getting covered in ticks. So it's a little bit different here, but we don't, as you said, we don't have the density of the population they have over there. And we certainly don't have that 1,000-plus-year-old infrastructure. Seeing cobbles in the race, I thought was quite interesting. And I just from a technical point of view, some pretty interesting equipment choices, which we can dig into. One thought that I did have about the course itself, yes, very much I think was the spirit of gravel spirit course. It had everything. I think for a world championship event, and again, we've discussed this ad infinitum offline, it did not seem right to me to start the event and have it narrow to two abreast on a bike path within 200 yards. That seemed to, and then to have that U-turn where people
the U-turn, yeah. I felt seen with the U-turn.
Yeah.
That was like, like a local event you'd be doing. You're like, who put this U-turn here? But no, this is the World Championships.
Yeah. Again, to go back to, is that gravel spirit? Is that not appropriate at a World Championship? I think they're getting a little taste of the gravel spirit experience. I mean, Spencer, you and I have started an event and then been sprinting full gas and discovered that there was a Jeep just parked in the middle of the road we were riding on like 100 yards after the start. Right?
You'd almost describe it as pitch black.
It was like, again, we'd
so
had
dark out,
like shivering in the pre-dawn light and then going full gas 1,000 watts and nearly riding into a parked Jeep. That is the gravel.
This is an open road. Like, oh my, I think about that. I've like stress dreams about that. Holy smokes.
I think you were right behind me as I almost hit the vehicle as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then you're like, don't worry, there's a downhill transition from pavement to gravel coming up. We'll wonder what's going to happen there. Yeah. We did make it through. I guess these guys made it through, and these ladies. Pretty successful event. I mean, I don't know. There's these big questions about, like, is this good? Is this bad? I guess I would argue it just is. It is what it is. Like, gravel has been, what do they say in Battlestar Galactica? It's happened before. It will happen again. Like, gravel has happened before. It will happen again. We had, and here's a big debate, kind of an interesting one from someone I know, Peter Abraham, threw a bomb out there on Threads saying, is this the year the balance of power? Also, I have an email from a reader I'm just looking at right now that reads, no one cares about gravel racing. I mean, the World Championships. It's not a big deal. Yes, in road racing, but not gravel. Gravel racing is for guys who are washed up on the road. So I just have that in my line of sight as we're spending an episode talking about gravel racing. But it's just, so he was saying the balance of power shifted from the US to Europe. Kind of an insane argument, but I kind of agree with him because he got a lot of pushback from, like, publicly and privately. One being the former UCI president saying, like, this is ridiculous. What are you talking about? There's Strada Bianchi. There's people have been riding on gravel for over 100 years. But I kind of know what he means. Like, I would say there's like small G gravel, like when they do the gravel section at the 2010 Giro d'Italia, and it's amazing. And Cadel Evans wins the stage, and Vinokurov goes into the leader's jersey. Like, I'll always remember that stage. But then there's capital G gravel racing where you're wearing a flat bill. You've got 50 mil tires. It's faster to be over 40 mils on your tires. It's kind of been unlocked by modern technology, and by like very modern, like in the last 5 years. Really, have we got these fast gravel bikes that can traverse some tough terrain? It does feel like that is slipping away from the US. I mean, I guess we have Big Sugar coming up in a few weeks, and that's still a big event. But let's be clear about this. If Mathieu van der Poel shows up to any of these races, and I cannot believe people are pushing back on this, he's winning. Like, he's winning. He's the best. He's maybe not the best off-road rider in the world, but he's one of the best two, probably. Like, Tom Pidcock and him would win. If they really wanted to, they could win every World Cup mountain bike race. Like, they are unbelievable off-roadsmen. And also the same thing with Mariana Vos. So this, like, narrative that roadies are now winning gravel events and they're over. It's like, I'm sorry, but they're just the best. They're also the best off-road as they are on-road. It's crazy thing that power translates through the pedals almost just as easily on pavement as it does on gravel or single track. Go figure. But it does kind of like the top American. And I know that there were logistic and financial concerns here, but I believe the top American was Kobe Freeburn in 53rd. You would not describe that as a top 50 presence. Like, we just literally were not present at the front of the race. Amazing result from Kobe, 22 years old, top finisher at the Gravel World Championships for the US. But it like, what do you think about that, Andrew? Is gravel slipping away from the US? Will this just be a Europe similar to mountain biking, where now it's just a European dominated sport?
I feel like Peter must listen to this podcast because I believe I've been saying this exact thing for about a year. And I think within the last 2 episodes, I said US gravel's had its Altamont moment and the balance of power is now in Europe. So I think we've gone through the transition that happened with Norba and the UCI in the early 90s. Yeah, the best riders are definitely in Europe. They can show up and win. And I do think this narrative that if a Galactico can descend from the heavens and win in a discipline, that the discipline is invalid, I reject this narrative on its face as false. Like, look at cyclocross. Mathieu van der Poel and Wout did that for the past, 7 years? And those races were still really fun to watch. And the level of talent was extremely high in cyclocross. And in fact, we've seen some riders like Quentin Hermans, who finished 3rd actually in the Gravel World Championships, world-class talent. Is he ever going to be Van der Poel in cyclocross or gravel? No, but Van der Poel was doing the same thing to Quentin Hermans in cyclocross that he just did to him at the World Championship for, a decade plus. So this guy can just show up. If he's rested, he can beat anybody on most days on terrain that suits him. I think an interesting question here, because we did see Wout show up last year and Wout ended up flatting. So flatting and mechanicals are always an issue. So you just to maybe walk back what I said a bit, the Galacticos can descend from the heavens and win 99% of the time. And then there's always that small chance they have a mechanical, right?
Yeah.
Or, also we should definitely talk about this. One of the aspects of this race that's interesting, because of the qualification process, I'm looking at the start list here. So we had 195 finishers. Oh, wow. Elliot Iserbit did not finish the race. That's probably the best cyclocross racer in the world after Pidcock, Van der Poel, and Wout. Lawrence Sweek, also top cyclocross racer, DNF. Those are both Belgians. So we had around, I'd say, 250 people started. There were about 290 on the start list. And of the athletes in the event on this start list that I have in front of me, 60 of them were Belgians. So we had, we're talking about a 2 abreast course for most of the course, narrowing to single track in many spots. And there were 60 Belgians. So that's whack. Like, they got to do something about this. And then there, of course, is the controversy where in the chase group, we had trade teammates of Van der Poel who pretty clearly were disrupting the chase and blocking. Would Van der Poel have still destroyed this entire race and won? Yeah, he would have won. And it's pretty weird that you can just clog the goat path with 60 Belgians.
Yeah, well, and there was a 16-rider front group with 10 Belgians in it at one point, like 75K to go. I mean, on the team stuff, I thought it was weird during the race. I was like, whoa, like, what is going on? These Belgians are like, and I was like, how are they messing this up? Because then Florian Vermeesch goes clear with Van der Poel and like pulls them away. And you're like, well, this is a little strange. Like, what's happening? The Belgians are chasing behind. But then I guess if you sit back and think about it, like, so there was 3 Alpecin riders in the top 5. Also big boys. You wonder, my wife was like, why isn't Tom Pidcock at this race? First of all, I think Ineos is like, hey, bud, go get some results for Ineos, not for the UK, because we need you to recoup some costs on that contract. But these are big boys. The top 10 are all massive. Like, maybe, I think everyone in the top 10 is over 6 feet tall. So this maybe wouldn't have been the perfect race for Pidcock. But 3 Alpecin riders in the top 5. I guess if you think about it, there's probably no Belgian team. I think that was a mistake we were making as viewers. We're like, how do the Belgians not have a better strategy? It's like, I doubt they had a 60-rider team meeting. Like, what did they hold it in a basketball, like on a basketball court? Like, I don't think so. Like, they don't really care. I mean, there's no infrastructure around these national teams for gravel. Like, you're not getting a bonus for having a rider win. So they just are like, yep, this dude pays my salary. Mathieu Van Der Poel is kind of a co-owner of that team. So like, what are you going to do? Like, sorry, boss, I chased you down. Now let's get on the train together. Or can you give me a ride in your Lamborghini back to the start so I can get my car? Like, that's not going to go over well. So I think it was a little like, it fooled us a little bit that they're a national team jerseys, but there really was no national team strategy. And they did a fantastic job of clogging up the chase. Yeah, Jasper Phillips and Jasper Stuyven just like fell victim to it, where he's like all mad at the finish. It's like, hey, bud, like this is like Cat 5 Kansas State Championships where you can't chase down the guy that drove you to the race. Okay, this is I don't care about team tactics. All right,
man,
it was interesting to watch. It was actually interesting to watch Florian Vermeersch clearly going for second, which I think is a smart decision. Like at this point, if Van Der Poel or Pogacar's at the race, just go for second because you're not going to win. Like he pulled Van Der Poel away from that group, from his own Belgian teammates, thinking, I don't want them to catch us because if they catch us, I'm not getting in the top 3. And he just rode for second and he got second. So good for him. Also, what if Van Der Poel would have flatted? Then he would have won. So it's actually, I think it's kind of the Moneyball strategy. You'll see more and more as riders racing for second. Get up the road with the favorite who knows what happens. Like, what is there, a 5-10% chance they flat? That's better than trying to win from a group of 10. Like, that's probably not going to happen. So it's kind of I think you'll see more and more of that as maybe over the next 3 or 4 years, as these guys, no one wants to talk about the same people win every race in cycling. Like, it's the same 4 riders that win almost every race. And so people are going to have to start thinking about second like it's winning.
I want to talk about Matej Mohoric. First, though, Spencer, you've surfaced a repressed memory that I want to share. Speaking of giving teammates rides to the state championships, I went to the state championship road race in California in I think 2003 or 2004, and picked my teammate up. We threw all the bikes in the back of my truck, and in the middle of the race, like 30 miles into the race, I had a spoke break on a downhill while we were going around a corner like 50 miles an hour. And I think what I deduced over time is that he had put his bike on top of mine in such a way in the car that it, whatever, had done something to dent or weaken the spoke, and then my spoke blew out in the middle of the race. I can live with it now. It was a tough moment at the time. And then we rode home together and got tacos.
And so, I mean, you could add the bike rack, but then your bike's covered with bugs when you get
exactly.
To the
I mean, do you want to take the risk? Freshly lubed chain, you getting dust on it. Who knows?
It rains.
That California air. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't want to roll the dice. Yeah. So Mohoric, it was interesting. I was watching an interview with Mohoric prior to the race, and it was interesting in the pre-race interviews, and I'm talking about like 5-10 minutes before the race. Like I saw a Marianne Vos interview where she's actually in the pen, and both she and Mohoric had some interesting equipment choices. So I'll talk about it briefly. So Vos was in the pen. All these riders, when they were getting interviewed, tranquilo. So they did seem a bit more laid back than they typically are before, firing it up for a tour stage win or something like that. Like, and the interview with Mohoric was while he was on his trainer warming up, maybe 20 minutes. Well, who knows? Maybe he had to be in the pen 4 hours early. I have no idea.
I think he could roll in whenever he would.
Yeah, I think if you're the world champion, you get to do the Davis Fenny and just ride backwards towards the front of the race and then back into the front of the field, which if you're listening, you should just do that. It's really the flex. Anyhow, Vos, of course, was running this new system that we saw tested by Wout et al. At Paris-Roubaix 2024, and it allows riders to adjust pressure on their tires during the race. So there's a small compressor that's on the hub. It has, a finite amount of air, but they can make adjustments up or down throughout the course of the race. And as we saw with Vos's attack and then her sprint, I think, having higher pressure at that moment certainly would have been favorable. We can talk about this when we get into the outcome of that race. Kopecky seemed completely shelled. I'm not sure that having 4 more PSI was going to win that race for her. Nonetheless, I do think this is a really interesting moment in the technical equipment side history of cycling, because I do think we're going to see this technology deployed frequently during the 2025 season. And I do think it's potentially a game-changing technology that could stop people from getting flats, make them more efficient on the road, and set them up for a better sprint when they get onto the velodrome at Roubaix. So we can talk about that in a moment. On the men's side, Mohoric, has now put in the hard yards. He ruined his Tour de France by going to, I still think it ruined his Tour de France.
I do. I really think that
by
too.
Going to Unbound, landed at MCI, Kansas City International Airport, and, spent a lot of time, got highly fatigued, maybe picked up a bug, and then goes back.
Food. Can you imagine what he was eating?
Oh,
Not
man.
what he's used to.
Yeah. He might have been at Joe's having a rack of ribs or a Z-Man.
Yeah.
We don't really know. Anyhow, he does learn some important lessons. So for anyone who's closely following gravel, as I am, Mohoric and his teammates from Bahrain, when they showed up in Kansas, I think they were on maybe 38, Spencer. They were on like narrow tires, high pressure. It was like, again, going back to this Norba UCI mid-90s mountain bike heyday. Back then we had people like Julian Absalon and others running, they would turn their suspension forks into rigid forks, because the mountain bike courses in Europe at that time, you didn't really need anything. You could basically run a hardtail, but for sponsors, you had to run your fork. So Mohoric shows up at Unbound. He's on these skinny, super hard, overinflated tires. He'd made some adjustments for the race. Okay, so he comes back. This man is transformed. He's seen the light of gravel. The gravel spirit and all its holiness has touched him. He may have been watching some Dylan Johnson videos. I was just texting with a bunch of gravel pros, including Dylan and Drew Dillman, who's taking a real pro wrestling hype approach to his career currently, getting some insights about Gravel World's Lifetime Grand Prix and equipment. So Mohoric comes back. He's warming up for the race, the Gravel World Championships. What's he on? He's on like 2-inch wide tires. I think he might have been on Conti Terra speeds.
Interesting.
So he was specifically asked about it, and he was like, yeah, there's no doubt about it. Wider tires are faster. So Dylan Johnson, your incredible reach and influence has touched the highest levels of the sport. Mohoric now a convert to the approach that Dylan Johnson has been promulgating now for more than 14 months. So Mohoric goes wide, and then what does he have on his drops? He's got a thumb lever. He's running a dropper post in the Gravel World Championships where there's not a tremendous amount of climbing. And they asked him about it, and he said, hey, I'm running a dropper post because I've noticed you slide out all the time in corners because you have no control of your bike. So I'm using it to drop my center of gravity through these turns. That seems like it'd be a tricky thing to do during those moments to me. However, I'm not Matej Mohoric, and I'm not a world-class bike handler the way he is. So that was kind of interesting. Again, he's innovating on the equipment side to try to get that edge. So this is one of the ways in which the gravel spirit of the U.S. has now kissed the highest levels of the sport in Europe, where, as you said, Spencer, capital G gravel now resides.
Maybe what he's talking about is, it was kind of the course some people didn't like it because there was a lot of road, but maybe what he means is he's dropping it down for if it wasn't really single track, it was like mud gravel and forest, and then popping it back up on the road. I tend to like that style of racing because what happens is everyone gets fatigued. You're like at 450 watts off road. And then when you get to the road, if you're really, really good, you can keep going hard, but most people have to rest. So it kind of adds, that's where the winning attack moved. That's where Florian Vermeersch attacked. Winning attack went, not winning attack moved. But it can really, you see it at Roubaix. Like a lot of times that's where the attacks go. But on the women's side, Marianne Vos wins the sprint. My big takeaway about this is, what the heck? Again, we're now relitigating the World Road Race Championships. Like, she probably would have won that sprint against Kopecky at the World Road Race Championships. I still can't believe her own teammates dropped her, or her own teammate. Like that, watching that, I was just thinking, oh man, like she should be double world champion at 37 years old. This is Exhibit A. But yeah, Kopecky looked cooked. I do think it probably helps a lot to be able to change, especially on a course like that where you're going from really soft mud to pavement, sprinting in a town center. They had people were complaining about the pavement at the finish. Is like, hey, listen, like you want to finish in the town center. Andrew and I finished out on the levee at BWR, was not the same as the town center. Okay, you got to finish in the town center. Usually they are paved, but it probably did help quite a bit being able to change your pressure. I think we'll see that a lot. Dylan Johnson's completely right, by the way. There's this phobia of big tires. Like people really, they're often, it's my theory that almost everyone is always under tired. Like I think Mads Pedersen runs a 32 mil tire on the road and he seems to do pretty well. Like it often won't slow you down as much as you think it will. And if the roads are at all bumpy, unless you live in Singapore, it's probably going to help you because you're losing speed when you're off the ground. And almost everywhere in the world, the pavement is not so smooth that you're never not leaving the ground. The next point I was going to make, I have forgotten about. Oh, wait. So Perry Tours, speaking of Mads Pedersen, this is what I'm going to say. Did you watch Perry Tours? If you didn't know anything about cycling, you would not have known which one was the Gravel World Championships. It's a road race that they've had gravel sections to. Oddly, it was raining at Perry Tours, not at the Gravel World Championships of Gravel, even though they weren't that far apart. Tours looked pretty cool. I would almost say it was the better race because it looked more like a Roubaix of our childhood where everyone's soaked and muddy. But things are starting to mix here in uncomfortable ways. And you're thinking, well, why is one the gravel race and one's the road race? And then also, why are these being held on the same day? And why is the competition split between them? And then what's the bigger race? Like, do these, like, as you said, there was a sense of relaxation at the Gravel World Championships. Like, is this a serious race? Like, are people really going to care about this? Or is it just like a fun sideshow that no big riders will race in 5 years? Like cyclocross. Even though that's not really true about
cycling. Right. I mean, we didn't talk about this, Spencer. Another argument I do think we should explore here. Van der Poel wins Road Worlds. He didn't win it. Had he won it, does he show up at this race?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably he does because he's not doing Lombardia. Why is he not doing Lombardia? I guess that's like another question. But I guess this is the finish to his season and it was maybe fun. So he probably does it just for fun.
Right.
But you get this weird thing where he's not going to do Perry Tours, maybe ever in his career. So even though gravel is the less serious race, maybe that helps it because he can go and is like, yeah, I'll finish my season at the Gravel World Championships because that's a good time. Also, Matej Mohoric, pretty good finish, 7th. He was in that front group. I will say he did often, when accelerations happened, he did often look like the rider who was hurting the most and was being tailed off the back versus like Connor Swift finishes 6th. Connor Swift was flying in that group. Mohoric looked like he was just hanging on. Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens in the offseason if he approaches next season differently because I do think he got in a hole because of this gravel thing. Should we? Hold on.
I've got to let me ask a follow-up question here, Spencer. I'm out here in Mid-Coast, Maine. I have been kicking this around a bit with my riding friends. You were in the epicenter of gravel, and I'm just wondering, down at the Scratch Cafe, what are they talking about in terms of just the level of competition within the race? Because you and I have talked a bit here today about, was this a serious race? Was it hard enough? Was this a real course? My point of view is, any race, any course can be almost impossibly hard. And if you think about the dynamics in a race like this, and again, for you and I, flatlanders, it really, all it takes is like 10 feet of elevation gain, a patch of mud, a turn, and you can be in a spot of bother real quick in an event like this. And just watching that chase group, and like you said, Mohoric is getting tailed off the back, just people hitting it over and over and over again, even on flat terrain, it can be a damn hard race. So I don't want us to discount just the level of competition within the race, even if we did have 60 plus Belgians like extras and Spaceballs running around out there. This was still a hard event.
Yeah, like they're just like getting shot down. You're like, how are there so many of them? No, you're right. It was very hard. I don't mean to physically
I'm not
on the
saying
ground.
you're saying
sure.
this. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm just like down at Scratch Cafe. You're getting a curry bowl or whatever. Like, imagining there's some chatter like this.
I think this is good. I'm glad you brought this up. So as I said, Kobe Freeburn finishes 53rd. Chad Haga 55th. These are all Colorado people. And then Ethan Overson is down here somewhere, an American, also a Colorado person.
Brennan Wirtz, we've got, I believe he's like 160th U.S. gravel national champion. And I don't know where, I'm sure these guys were not gridded, right?
No.
They're like, hey, here's the back of the field, Brennan.
Yeah. There's 1,000 people in front of you. Good luck. Okay, Ethan Overson, 110th. I believe he's from Boulder, lives in Boulder.
Yeah.
So these guys obviously know how hard the race is. I would bet though, like if you go down to Scratch, you get your curry bowl, your rice bowl. I would bet you might overhear people being like, that wasn't even a real gravel race. Like, I bet that was easy. Like Keegan wins by 10 minutes easy. Like Van der Poel, he's not even good. Like it's this odd thing in Boulder where it's like very cycling centric, but very dismissive almost of European cycling. And it's like American supremacy is the big thing where, it's like, okay, Van der Poel won Roubaix and Flanders in the same year, but he didn't win Mount Evans. So is that even a complete season? It's so turned inwards on itself. And I get the same feeling from the American gravel community where, just like Keegan didn't even show up. Seeing the size of the people in the top 10, that probably makes sense. Like Tom Pidcock, he's not a classics rider. He's like 60, low 60 kilos, mid 60 kilos. So you can understand why people skipped it, but I bet a lot of people were pretty dismissive of it. I think the better you get, like I'm saying with Kobe and Ethan, like they know, Chad Haga knows how hard it is. Like the guy won one Grand Tour stage in his career, and I know that's amazing. And he probably is like, wow, I can't believe I did that. That was so hard to do. But I don't think the average Boulderite really respects how difficult and high the level of racing is across the pond versus here. They probably think that their like super training ride is at the same level as the Gravel World Championships. Even if they might not say that, but they probably think that, if that makes sense.
So to shift over to the women's race, did you see any path for Kopecky to win this? Given, it just visually watching it on TV, she looked cooked to me. I didn't, she did respond to that final attack that Voss had on that uphill cobbled section just prior to entering the finishing straight and was looking pretty good. But Kopecky just looked completely cooked once the sprint kicked off. And
it's crazy we're saying that because Kopecky probably had the best season of her career.
Right.
And is probably, I would say, she's the UCI world number 1 right now. I would say she'll be the best rider in the world next year. She's literally the world champion 2 years in a row.
Not bad.
And you're right. She looked cooked. Like if you didn't know that, you'd be like, Voss is the better rider. Probably speaks to just how less work Voss is doing on every technical section. Just like save a little bit here and there. And then by the end of the race, these weren't long races, by the way. Like I was actually surprised. The men's was 4.5 hours. Women's is 4 hours. That's road race. It's like 2 hours shorter than a monument, but that's road race distance. So not real gravel distance.
Yeah, it's kind of like a warm up for like if Lachlan Morton were doing this would be his equivalent of like the first 5 minutes of your ride in zone 2.
The neutral rollout at Leadville is about this. But yeah, I think it's just a testament to how much energy Voss saved throughout the course, that she was like relatively fresh at the finish line against such a good rider. I was nervous because I think I said last week, I was like, Voss wins a sprint against Kopecky like every time. And then I was like, oh boy. I didn't think this thesis was getting tested 24 hours after I said that.
Yeah, you do have to think Kopecky is the bigger rider. Voss was just getting way more draft proportionately throughout the course of this event. So I think, setting aside who has a better sprint, her energy savings would have been massive, I think.
Here, I'm going to look up how much they weigh. Kopecky is, you're right, quite a bit bigger. I guess it was like seeing the sport's future, past and present, where Voss was the best, like unbeatable for years.
Right.
Higher kind of came back, is good, isn't the same, but it was fun to see her kind of work over the world's current best rider. But I mean, that's a weird thing in women's cycling where Kopecky, kind of a disappointing spring, but setting that aside, like 5th at Flanders, 19th at Gent-Wevelgem, does win Paris-Roubaix. So you'd say that's pretty good. But other than that, had an amazing season, like flawless season almost. But the sport's almost covered like Demi Vollering's the unstoppable rider. She's the Tadej Pogacar of women's cycling, but it's actually not the case. Like Kopecky is really good. It kind of makes me wonder about the internal calculation at SD Works. We're like, yeah, like we're comfortable, going to the Tour next year with Kopecky, like because she won Tour of Romandy over Vollering, which had like a 9K long, like I think it was like a 9% climb for 9K summit finish. I'm looking. Yeah, really tough climb. So they might be comfortable just running that back with Kopecky. It's going to be really weird with the director then Anna van der Breggen coming into race. That's still have a lot of questions about that. But to transition out of gravel, quickly touch on road before we get into these Tom Pidcock rumors. Giro dell'Emilia last weekend.
Well, hold on. Sorry, we have to do one more thing. How old do we believe Valtteri Bottas is? Because he was there racing.
And you asked this, I assume, because of some sort of, it's funny. I asked him how old he was at BWR because we were in the same group. I bet he's like 30. Is he like 34 years old?
Oh, okay. So I want to know how he finished because he's
35.
He's a professional athlete. So I just want to see how he did.
Yes, that is good.
Right. Okay. I'm going to keep looking for this so you can move on to the next topic, and I'm going to locate his finish time.
Listen to this talk because Pogacar's ruined the road season. The road is dead. Long live gravel, because we're at Amelia. If you've ever watched this race, it's hard. It's like 215K long. I don't think people realize how long it is, but there's like goes out in the countryside, comes into Bologna, 5 passes of the San Luca climb, which is tough, like 2K long at 10% average with steep pitches in there, and 4 laps. So you're like uphill, downhill. They did 2 of the laps, stage 2 of the Tour. If you remember when Pogacar attacked and then Vindigo followed, and everyone's like, yo, Jonas is going to win the Tour because he followed an attack that was a minute long and then kind of got dropped in the descent. But what that means is you're not really penalized for being off the front because you're either going uphill or downhill. If you're Pogacar, you're good at both. I kind of thought, he's going to attack second to last lap. No, he attacks as soon as they hit the climb. Evenepoel goes to the front, attacks. He kind of looked like he was cold, so he might have just been trying to stay warm. Immediately gone, like in the team car. Minutes after that, Primož Roglič, 3-time winner of this race, is like, yeah, this is too cold and rainy. I'm done. Pogacar just rides away and wins the race. It's like not even competition. Wins by almost 2 minutes over Tom Pidcock. Interesting that Pidcock gets second. That's a really good result for him, kind of showing signs of life at the end of the season, just as some rumors are swirling, which we'll talk about in a second. But I mentioned this because we have Lombardia coming up this weekend and final monument of the season. And also it means Pogacar, he didn't race on Monday. He was supposed to race on Tuesday. He was supposed to race on Tuesday. I assume he would have won. But it means he's only lost, let's count him. He lost San Remo, which is a sprinter's race. He lost GP Quebec, which is kind of a sprinter's race. Lost a time trial at the Tour to Remco Evenepoel, who's the world's best time trialist. Lost stage 11 to Jonas Vingegaard, who is his equal in some ways in stage racing. I think those might be the only races he's tried to win and lose. Oh no, he lost first stage of Volta Catalunya because he started a sprint too late and a solo rider stayed off the front. That's the best season of all time. I don't care what anyone says. Like, there's been 5 kilometers where he's been even uncomfortable. I would say it's like the last 5K of the climb on stage 11 of the Tour where he was on Jonas's wheel. Like, that might be the only time he was even on someone's wheel and not in hurting. Like, this is unbelievable. But we're going to Lombardia this weekend. It is a race. They kind of flip it. It's always like Bergamo to Como or Como to Bergamo. Kind of goes up on this peninsula, the Bellagio Peninsula at Lake Como. Beautiful place. Go ride if you can. There. This year, I don't fully know why they did this. They added a 30-minute climb that tops out 40K from the finish. That means that Tadej Pogacar, all he has to do is get to that climb. He's going to drop everyone. Someone was texting me like, oh, what if someone stays with him? They could outsprint him. It's like, no one's staying with him. And guess what? No one's outsprinting him. So he's going to win this. But he did this climb yesterday just to shake the legs out. 30 minutes. breaks the Strava KOA by about 2 minutes. VAM, this is 30 minutes. VAM, 1600, 6.5% average climb. That's ridiculous. And 15 mile an hour average speed. My little watts calculator has him at 420 watts. That's for about 31 minutes, just like a couple days before the race, just like shaking the legs. So he's going to go sub 30 on this climb. He's probably going to top it with no one on his wheel. I have to imagine he rides to the finish. As you said, with the gravel, in respect to the gravel race with Wout, I guess anything can happen. He could crash, maybe he could flat, but if you're a competitor, like I wouldn't even know what to tell you. I think Johan said this week, if you were his competitor, the thing you should be doing this offseason is looking up what races are Pogačar not doing, and I'll do those, because he's as close to unbeatable, especially on a course like this, as we've ever seen. And this climb probably explains why Van der Poel's not at Lombardia, even though in theory, sometimes the course is a little bit easier. He probably could compete, but I think he sees the writing on the wall here. I mean, I don't even know what to tell Evan about. Try not to get dropped, maybe. Yeah. Like that's it, and then hope something happens in the final few kilometers.
Right. The thing that I was just thinking about, Pog is only 26. It's going to be a while before he reached. I mean, he's still peaking, man.
Yeah, he's getting better.
As you've noted this week, I think on the move, this is the first year Pog's really paid attention to his diet. Like there's still things this guy can dial in. It's bananas. It's going to be pretty tough for his competitors. You have to think too at this point, if you're Remco, and we know, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the guy because, he's been a world champion. He's definitely a very serious rider and one of the 4 best in the world. He still just seems not that mentally tough to me. He still doesn't seem like he can roll with the punches and the ups and downs. He's just mentally defeated too quickly. There, of course, was this issue of he got something in his eye, which a lot of people are shitting on him for this. I have to say, like, hey, you know what? If legit, like, you do have something that makes it so you can't see and you're in the middle of a bike race, I accept that. You can stop. Just the timing seemed a little suspicious to me.
Yeah. I mean, we know. Yes. I mean, obviously, that's not safe. If something was in his eye, it's not safe. We kind of all know this person. It's like, oh, you got something in your eye just as Pogačar started to accelerate. Like, I mean, he does. I don't know about his mental toughness. He does not roll at the punches. I would say quite the opposite. Yeah. He rolls like into the punches. The punches are following him wherever he is rolling. He just has no ability. He's not a malleable thing. I mean, it was funny. Our friend Jonathan Kaplan was rewatching the 2020 tour like recently, and it kind of had me going back and looking at some of the stages. It's shocking how much better Pogačar is now. Like the physical level is so much higher now. And that's also why, like, remember Mark Hirschi was the revelation of that tour. And then he's not racking up tour stage wins now. It's like, it's incredible Mark Hirschi's even winning because the level is so much higher now than it was in 2020. Like, that's why a lot of these guys, like Romain Bardet was a GC rider. He's not a GC rider anymore, even though he's probably physically better than he was back then. But the thing is, like, Pogačar just rolls with the punches. He lost minutes in the crosswinds on the first week of that tour. It's like, wasn't fazed by it at all. And like, I think that's a very underrated trait at the top level of any sport, where it's like, I think he said in his interview after the stage, he's like, yeah, it doesn't matter because I'll just get the time back later. Like, he's 20 years old, in his first tour. It's like, yeah, I'll get that time back. And he did, and he won. So also you forget about that time loss, and then you're like, oh, it's so tragic. The stage 20 time trial where Roglic loses it. It's like, actually, Roglic shouldn't even have been in the jersey. Like, he was only in the jersey because Pogačar's team didn't know what they're doing, and that's one of the biggest bike races. The first time he's ever done a really big bike race, and he was probably out of position. But I only say that to say he'll win on Saturday. And Remco probably won't win. If you're Remco, it is a tough spot to be because, as you say, he's very good. Top 4 in the world. Where does he fit in? You kind of worry. And like, we know that he's great, and we can kind of put his accomplishments into the correct place where they should be. I kind of worry about him in Belgium. Like, if this goes on and he's losing every time to Pogačar, can't beat him in a Grand Tour, can't beat him in a one day. Like, what's that pressure like in Belgium? Because they're counting on him to be like an Eddie Merckx. They're counting on him to beat Tadej Pogačar. but he probably won't be.
Yeah, a thought that I have, and then I will share why this strategy is not being deployed. Because when I think about Remco and some of the challenges that he faces are challenges that he creates himself. And the way he creates these challenges, Spencer, is by opening his mouth. And I mean, yeah, you and I, and probably many people listening, we've been around a lot of world-class performers who are the best in the world at what they do. It can be challenging for someone like that to take advice or outside counsel from someone who might know better than them. And I have a feeling, I am curious, is Remco just surrounded by yes people and sycophants? I think the answer is probably yes. And also, just in general, I think a worthwhile philosophy to pursue in life is no unforced errors, no own goals. You should never be kicking the ball into your own net. And that's what I see Remco doing over and over when he opens his mouth. Even when he won the Olympic road race, he had that moment. He stops, he picks up his bike. Okay, that's cool. 5 minutes later, he's talking about, I did this so that I could have a cool photo on Instagram. Shut your mouth, man. Like, okay, you can think that, but that's a strange thing to say, in my view, after winning the Olympics. I don't know. It just it's just like very easy to dislike some of the things that he says, and then equally, whatever. We're just seeing these snippets of this. I just think if Pog just seems adamantine. He's just impenetrable. I don't think anything rattles his confidence at this point. And I think when he sees Remco making these statements or saying, I just kept thinking of Ralphie in A Christmas Story. You'll shoot your eye out, when Remco, said he had something in his eye and quit the race. But it's like, why not just leave the race and keep it a mystery, and Pog can guess about why you stopped? You know what I mean? Just like, we don't need to hear your whiny narrative every time something goes wrong. Just shut your mouth, please.
Yeah, and it's like a non-target race. It's like Roglic just dropped out. He's actually into the season.
Never said, didn't even know until I read it in the story. Yeah,
like, I'm going home, and it's like, that's it, and that's definitely a better long-term strategy. It'd be where we could do a whole podcast series on probably like the emotional prison that Remco is in due to how he, where he lives. Like, he lives in a fishbowl. I do have to run, but you've teed this up perfectly. Surrounded by yes men, trying to live up to unrealistic expectations. This describes Mr. Tom Pidcock. He's very, very good off-road rider. Like, his mountain biking exploits this year were unbelievable. I really enjoyed watching him race mountain bike this year. I did not expect this to go viral. I said in the Move episode this week, I just thought this was public knowledge that anyone could look up. He's won 5 races in his road career. That is not that many races. Like, Pogacar has won that probably since the tour finished. Like, this is not a prolific winner. I heard that he makes 5 million pounds, that's over 6 million euros. That would make him probably the second highest paid rider in the sport per year. Ineos allegedly is trying to get rid of him because they think that's too much money. Q36.5 is allegedly, according to reporting from Daniel Friba and Ciro Scandamilio, is the team like most poised to sign him. I don't totally believe that, because I don't. Here's the thing with these rumors. I don't discount that people have been told that, and that people might think that. Q36.5 might think that. Ineos might think that. I just don't think it's going to happen, because at the end of the day, Pidcock's going to say, wait, so I go to Q36.5 and I don't do a single Grand Tour? I mean, maybe he doesn't care about Grand Tours. Maybe that's the answer here. And he's going to say, that sounds awesome. Ineos is going to pay £1 million in my contract. Q36.5 pays 4. I'm good to go. I don't have to race that much on the road. I can do my off-road stuff because they're sponsored by Scott. It's a little weird because the owner of that team owns Pinarello, the bike brand, but you'd imagine they'd eventually want him on Pinarello. Guys like this are good for bike brands, though. It's like the Canyon deal with Mathieu van der Poel, because he can advertise the whole line of bikes because he does every type of race. You had a theory, Andrew, that this is all misinformation to drive up his price. I kind of like with the let's use the Remco rumors as an example. With that, I could see it because it was like Remco, Evenepoel's at the Red Bull Performance Center. I like heard that from reliable sources, but now I'm kind of wondering what that was about. Was that just a tactic from his representation, which I think is just his dad, to drive up the price with Quick Step so they would re-sign him for more money? Because he was not making a terrible, his base salary actually was quite pedestrian, like on par with like what a Yates brother might make. So was that them just trying to drive up the price with Quick Step? With that, I can totally understand that agents are leaking misinformation to scare his team into signing him for more money. Just quickly, like if you can in 60 seconds, what would be the strategy here? Why would someone, because this doesn't look great for Pidcock. It looks like Ineos is trying to get rid of him and pay. It's like, we're going to build a Tom Pidcock and Ineos is going to pay for it. So he's leaving and they want him gone so bad because they can't stand his entourage inside the team telling them what to do, and he doesn't win that often.
Who is this entourage, by the way? Like, what are we talking about?
It's this cross crowd,
Does he have like a team of backup dancer he pulls up with? It's like a Backstreet Boys thing. They're doing synchronized TikTok dances.
This Belgian mechanic that's still gluing tubulars on, and the team doesn't like it. I don't know. He doesn't, because he doesn't really seem like a diva. It's like what you're saying about Evenepoel. Like Pidcock's the opposite. He actually seems kind of down to earth when you listen to him speak. But I did hear he's just like buying the same Lamborghini over and over again in different colors because he doesn't know what to do with his money. So there might be some.
Are you being serious? Is that a real thing?
I did hear that. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. All right. So that's like the number one way to go bankrupt as a professional.
That was my number one thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I could stand up a straw man for you to karate chop in half, Spencer. What I can tell you is that Valtteri Bottas is 35, and I would say he has to be among the fastest age group gravel racers in the world. I mean, the guy, he is a legit world-class athlete. He has one of 21 seats in Formula One. So I'm probably getting that wrong, Formula One fans.
20, right? 10 teams, 2 drivers. There's all
right. It has to be an even number, right? So all right, whatever. He's one of the most elite athletes on the planet. He trains like a professional cyclist, pulls up gravel world championships. This guy, 247 people in his field. I'm going to let you guess, Spencer, where does Bottas finish? World-class athlete, one of the best in the world.
Right, I bet it was like, I'm going to say it was not great. I bet it was like 100th.
Okay, 133rd. And he said he was more nervous than before an F1 race before the start. So actually, he's just like everybody else. So if you're, feeling a few butterflies while you're waiting in the pen with 300 people for the start of your gravel race, just remember one of the world's best athletes feels the same thing. And he said, hey, I'm nervous because I know it's going to last for 6 hours, but that's why I'm here.
This is someone who drives a car roughly the speed of a plane, like through city centers.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
that's and he actually, and then he talked about the pen and having to get there early to queue up for the single track sections as being some of the biggest challenges. So, man, it's funny at the end of the day, no matter who you are and what you have, people kind of worry about the same stuff, and if you're racing gravel, you've had those sleepless nights 2 or 3 days before the event. You go out, you preview the course, and you're just thinking, oh my God, like, am I going to be in the right spot in the pen? Am I going to be able to get to that turn? What's going to happen there? How hard is it going to be? Will there be a giant wreck? All the same stuff. So that's what I can tell you. Yeah.
He dropped me hard in the forest, the huge forest, the river, what are they called? The river trails, something like that, whatever.
Yeah.
In Lawrence,
the river trail.
I couldn't keep up with them. Hand up, Bottas, better mountain biker than I am. So if he's nervous, oh man, I wouldn't want to be there. But is Tom Pidcock going to Q36.5? Real quick.
Okay. So what I can tell you about that, I haven't made this association before, but Q39 has the best barbecue brisket in the entire world. It's Kansas City barbecue restaurant. Kansas City, of course, does have the world's best barbecue. Have you eaten there, Spencer?
No. I'm actually I'm going to actually KC like soon. I'm going to put this on the list.
Yes. I mean, if you're back for Unbound or any of the regional gravel events, most people hit up Joe's. Joe's, of course, famous for the Z-Man brisket sandwich with onion ring, provolone cheese on a Kaiser roll. Sounds kind of weird. It's awesome. Joe's, that sandwich is worth going there for. They also have great brisket, and their ribs, I would say, are the best in the world. If you want brisket, you need to go to Q39. So if you're a brisket aficionado, they're the best. That's what I think about when I think of Q36.5. If they just had 2.5 more Qs, they would be Q39. Going back to this question about Pidcock and my theory about what was happening with the negotiation, as you pointed out, Spencer, we don't have pay transparency in cycling. There are no salary caps. So there's generally a real asymmetry of information. And the teams also have no idea what other teams might be bidding on a rider. And while they might have a sense of, hey, you know, Pidcock's pulling up with 4 background dancers, they're always TikToking, he's not paying attention, like he's in his Lamborghini, whatever the case may be, these are just rumors. We don't know what spin the agent's putting on it. We also don't know what's happening inside of Ineos, and Ineos has its own motivations for driving down the market price, because I think you pointed this out, but because Pidcock has time left on his contract, this is going to be a buyout.
He's
so
like
if there's
4 years left on his deal.
So if I'm Ineos, what I want to do is drive down the perception of Pidcock's value. I want people to think that he's extremely difficult to work with, and I want them to take this rider off of my hands. And I don't want to have to do anything that results in a bigger strain or financial complexity or an increase in what we're already paying him. If I'm Pidcock's agent, I want the highest price possible. I definitely want to beat what's happening with my contract I currently have for my rider at Ineos. And as you pointed out, amazing rider. He's won 5 races, correct?
Correct.
All right. So he's won 5. Is that counting mountain bike races? And
No. That's just on the road, professional.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so
PWR.
That's what counts to these other teams. And if people think this guy's a pain in the ass, they're not going to pay his current contract price, and they're going to say, "Hey, what can I lowball? Can I get in early? Can I get like a Costco discount on this guy? Can I get the Kirkland brand version of Tom Pidcock?" But if his agent can create the perception of there's actually something wrong with Ineos and their management, which
it doesn't say you don't have to be a world-class
like who are you going to believe? Like Brailsford and company telling you Pidcock's an incredibly difficult rider, or Pidcock's agent who says, look at the score, this team is a complete mess. In fact, going back to why I really value the information I get through what's occurring, but again, at a strategic level, it really makes no sense. Some of the things that Geraint Thomas is saying that drive down the value of the team and probably puts them in a difficult spot for negotiations like this. I mean, there's public information that some of the most tenured staff and riders within the team, Dan Bigham, Geraint Thomas, they say, hey, this is a shit show. And so why would a world-class rider want to stay around there when they don't have the best high-performance program anymore, when they were once the best in the sport and among the best in the world? And they can't manage their talent in a way that produces results. They're like team top 7 through 10 in Grand Tours. So I would just want to create the appearance of things are a mess at Ineos and we have a better offer somewhere else. It's substantially bigger than what he was making at Ineos, and then just try to leverage that to get the best outcome possible for my client. I think what you pointed out about why that might not be the case because of whatever Ineos is saying about Pidcock, that's fine. But I think the street is going to discount what Ineos says, and they're going to probably believe what Bigham and Geraint Thomas are saying about what's going on over there.
Well, to your point, I mean, I'm reading a piece right now about how this would be a huge embarrassment for Ineos if they lose Tom Pidcock. And I do kind of agree, like, what's the point of Ineos if the best British riders, who's the best British rider? It's like Stevie Williams, Fred Wright. Those guys don't race for Ineos.
If the Swift cousins at the Gravel Worlds,
like, yeah, okay, like, yeah, I don't know if you can build a 50 million per year pound team around the Swift cousins. You might want, but I mean, that's kind of speaks to the issue. Like, those are maybe some of their best riders, and Like, look at Connor Swift, great rider. Like, I don't think he's not going to win Lombardia this weekend. But like, okay, let's say they lose Tom Pidcock. Do they miss him that much? I mean, he kind of saved their spring. They might miss him because they have so little else, and like they needed him to bail. They needed him to bail them out at Amstel Gold because they had nothing to show for the spring. But and he does have like a chance to win this weekend, which is saying something. But man, would they really miss him that much? Like, that's a lot of money. I guess what are they doing with the money they're saving? Like, who are they signing if they can't sign? I mean, maybe they go out and sign Stevie Williams and Fred Wright. Are those two riders together worth more than Tom Pidcock? It could be, at least on the road side. So I just don't know. I do think you could be right that the agent is spinning things to make Ineos look bad. Obviously, Ineos needs no help doing that because I was surprised there was like, why is Luke Rowe going to Decathlon instead of staying at Ineos to be a director? Well, he just recorded a podcast called like What's Wrong with Ineos. So yeah, they're not going to keep him around to be a director after that. Like, you kind of have to go. You can't stay because you're publicly trashing the team. They don't need any help doing that. But I guess I would question, is this a huge loss for Ineos if they lose him? Someone did say like, well, he's not going to win the Tour, so they got to get rid of him. It's like, well, they probably knew that when they signed him. Like, what? He's not a stager. He has no stage racing success in his career. So
no, I think they thought he could win the Tour, and then they discovered that he doesn't want to do the work to be a Tour winner.
Yeah, maybe figure that out before you sign him to like a £40 million deal.
I think this is like the classic, you get in a relationship with someone. I'm not saying I've ever done this in any time in my past, and you think like, hey, you know what, maybe this fundamental area where I'm not aligned with this person will change. So I'll accept that because I like all these other things. And then guess what? Over time, it doesn't. It's never happened to me. But then it doesn't work out for people.
Well, now I'm having PTSD, but I really do have to run. Thank you, Andrew. We'll leave on that note. A lot of repressed memories coming up, but thanks so much. And we'll be back next week, maybe with a special guest. I don't want to say because I don't want to spoil it, but we could have a big name on the show. But thank you, and we'll talk soon.
And may the gravel spirit be with all of you.
And also with you.